Well, hello, anybody who tunes in. I'm just setting up, again, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I'm just setting up a quick way of accessing worksheets for anyone who is joining today to do some GCSE revision of Unit 2 of the Crime and Punishment Unit of EdXL's GCSE History. GCSE? I guess that's the best way to phrase it. So I'm just going to put into the description a worksheet. I'll put it into comments as well, and I've pinned it to the top, and I'll explain how it's supposed to work, and I'll then get myself set up to have a look to see what people are saying in comments. So the idea is, very quickly, so Control V, nope, save. So we should be up and running, and you should have access now, should you want it, to a table in the description and in the comments. Hello to everyone. Hi. Wow, I know. Exciting stuff. We're on 153 subscribers at the moment, guys. But I think we should get more, because it's not about my subscribers as always. It's about children being able to learn about history. That's what it's about. So let's keep sharing the love. I know that the people who are joining in here love history. I'm seeing the names in the comments, and I know every single one of you loves history lessons. So hopefully we can share the wealth, guys. So let's see, is that updated? Can you get the table? Basically, I've put in the description, and I've pinned it to the top, a table. Oh, walking right into a wall. I'm finally up and running here. That shows you, hi everyone. I do say so. I'll believe so, Fiona. But there's a table in the description, and it covers everything that we have done for those of you who are following this revision live stream series on crime and punishment so far. So in the first column to the left there are key questions, which if you can grasp or if you can answer for each unit within the GCSE, you'll be in a really good place revision wise. So I don't know why you're running up against the wall. It's not the controls are very different to Assassin's Creed Unity, which I was playing yesterday. Just probably take a bit of, here we go, let's get moving. So there are key questions in the left. There are each unit, each period that we're going to consider over this series are in the rows along the top. And then in the medieval England section, I have included potential revision notes that you could have got or could have gleaned from the Medieval Dynasty live stream I ran, well, I think a week ago. So if you are interested here in terms of specifically revising for the GCSE exam, that is on the 18th of May, paper 1 for EdXL, then using that table would be really useful. You can click the link, you can download it, you can edit it yourself. Should be useful, or at least we hope so, don't we? Hello to everyone else who's just said hi. So what we're going to do, and a disclaimer, this game is rated according to the age certificates as M for mature. Now I've had a look on a few sites, and quite a few parent sites that I trust. I've rated this at like 13 plus or 14 plus age wise. I've turned off like the blood, and we're going to start playing through the story. I've turned off the subs, so if there are any naughty words they shouldn't come through, but just a slight disclaimer that I can't remember the story, so maybe something happens or doesn't happen that I'll end up thinking, oh, I wish that didn't happen on here. Like yesterday, someone got their head chopped off, and I wasn't expecting that, just randomly in the world that we were looking in. So just as a slight disclaimer before we start, so I'm going to get up the map, we're going to find the nearest mission, and we're just going to start playing through the story. So what we got? Don't forget the goose. Yeah, of course. The goose wasn't so much for surprise, I'll be honest. The goose was intentional, because we needed something to eat, didn't we? But just as a kind of overview, I'm just having a look. Someone was just checking notifications, and then they realised that this was on. How exciting is that? What a day. So, this is Assassin's Creed 2, and we're set. The game, at least this period of the game, is set in 1476. So, it's outside, technically speaking, of the period that we're going to be considering today. The period we're considering today is 1500 to 1700. This is technically speaking outside of that, and this is also Italy. It's not even. I did die. I killed a goose the other day for food, and then ended up starving anyway, so that was not good. But this game is set in Italy in a different time period, but it kind of covers what we need, because Italy was quite advanced, I guess, is a simple way of putting it. It was ahead of its time in the 15th century. So even though this is the 1400s, the advancement we're seeing, or the kind of culture we're seeing here, does represent or help us to understand what early modern England may have looked like. It, not so much in terms of architecture and clothing, but just in terms of general sentiment, and it's the general period that we need, and that's all that we're bothered about, isn't it? Right, let's have a look. Someone's looking after the baby brother. That's good. That's a nice thing to do. Well played. So, what we're going to do, I'm going to work through the key questions. So if you're looking at the table, or if you have looked at the previous live stream we ran on crime and punishment, I'm just going to work through the 4 key questions. The 4 key questions are: who's in charge? What types of crime are prominent? Ooh, close. How is the law enforced? And then how are criminals punished? So, we're going to get down here somehow safely, I hope. Wow, that was super realistic. Very, very accurate. So we're in the 15th century here. Yeah, thank you. Oh wow, someone's even going and this is community here, guys. There's people helping each other out in the comments in terms of what period we're looking at. So, this is my father in the game. This is Giovanni. And if you've played this, you might know it doesn't. Spoiler warning, it doesn't end particularly well for the family, at least in the beginning. And if we get far enough, we might actually see how criminals at the time are punished, just naturally as we play through the story. So I don't know what they're talking about here, probably something. Knowing Assassin's Creed, what's probably going to happen next is they're going to give me some fetch quest. They're going to give me a fetch quest. And what's going to happen is, I have to go meet someone somewhere probably, and then walk somewhere alongside them very, very slowly. That's generally speaking how a lot of Assassin's Creed games start. So we'll let them do the spiel, and then we'll see if we're right there. It'll probably be something along those lines, won't it? So whilst they're talking, I'll just introduce some of what the intention or the main purpose here is. Okay, so in early modern England, between 1500 and 1700, who is in charge? Who decides what the law is? Deliver a letter. Classic Assassin's Creed mission. There we go. But between 1500 and 1700, who makes the law? Well, just as in medieval England, it's the king or the queen. But whereas in medieval England it was the king or the queen under the heavy influence of the church, and Parliament was slowly, very slowly developing underneath the king or queen, in early modern England, the church really starts to lose its influence in a key way. And actually, given that we're in Italy and not far from Rome, quite relevant actually for what we're looking at here. There's something called the split with Rome, where Henry VIII wants to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon. The Pope won't allow it, head of the Catholic Church, so he basically jumps on the bandwagon of the Protestant Reformation to secure an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. So he can basically marry the person that he has got pregnant, Anne Boleyn. Now, this is all important for us because the influence of the church is diminished quite significantly when Cromwell, Henry VIII's chief minister at the time, pushes through a whole load of laws through Parliament in the hope that, oh, here we go, we're going to drop it off with him in a second, a whole load of laws that basically allow Henry to do what he wants, which means that the king is the most powerful person still making the law, but the church hasn't got the same level of influence over him as it had in the previous period. So that's quite a big shift. So we'll drop this letter off, and then we'll have a little thing. Oh no, don't. Oh no, I can't be bothered for this. Oh. He's bolting, stop him! Oh, I've got to get rid of them first. So we'll try and lose these scallywags first, and we'll go from there. So just whilst we're running up here, hopefully they won't chase us, but I think they can climb up. Which is annoying. Let's see. I need to get someone as a guest star. I think you're right, actually, and it's funny you should say that. I'm planning to get a few guests on because, as you've probably noticed, it's quite tricky to kind of make sure I'm tracking all the comments and any questions people have alongside running around on rooftops like a fool. So I'll have a look at that. Someone's coming back, excellent. Yeah, if there's any questions about anything, drop them in the comments. If there are any, I said this yesterday, and it is useful because I don't want to keep playing Assassin's Creed. If you've got any suggestions of other games we can play, then drop them in as well, okay? So, that should do. Now let's just go drop this letter off. Okay, guys. So, whilst Parliament is increasing in influence because it's being used to push through changes for the king, there is another period within British history, within the early modern period, that really cements the influence of Parliament. And weirdly, in a lot of textbooks, it doesn't even touch on this, right? Which I cannot. It blows my mind. It's something called the English Civil War, where Parliament goes to war with the King for a range of different reasons. Parliament wins, and then they chop the King's head off. Excuse me, they chop the King's head off, and then there's a period of about 11 years where Parliament rules England without a king or queen. A guy called Oliver Cromwell is put in charge as Lord Protector, but this is a huge deal. If we're thinking in terms of crime and punishment, if we're thinking of influences or changes in terms of who has the ability to make the law, well, that period is massive, okay? So in early modern England, the influence of the church diminishes, the influence of Parliament increases at one stage dramatically, to the point that Parliament's running the country on its own. And we'll come back to that in a minute, because that is going to help us answer the second key question in our table, or the second key question that we'd like to get our heads around if we're getting ready for our coming exam. Okay, so let's have a look. Quick glance at the comments. What are the games you're going to play? Well, I've got I found a game to do modern day England in. When was the Witchcraft Act? There's a few actually. Good question. There are a few. We'll come on to that, because the next question we're going to talk about is what types of crime were common in this period. So we're about to touch on that. Someone says hello, but they're too shy to say it themselves. What a shame. We want people to feel relaxed enough to say hello and have shout outs or whatever. I don't even know. I don't even know. Oh, I'm in the right place, it seems.
You worry too
right,
much,
gotta go through here. So there we go. First fetch quest, absolutely classic. Excellent question. In guys, look, I don't know who this is, so I can't answer that. But I'm not going to answer questions like this during the live stream, because it's not appropriate about why people have left classrooms or whatever. But let's get on to the Witchcraft Act. The second key question is what types of crime were prominent in early modern England. So here we're thinking about what types of things, like murder, theft, assault. These things kind of cover periods. They transcend across the entire unit. Okay, but some crimes are more prominent in certain areas. So in early modern England, towns are increasing in size, so there's an increase in things such as petty theft or fraud. I mean, just on the basis, I've got a few missions, right, this one's going to be probably another fetch quest. Once you get going, and this is the thing I guess a lot of games, once you get going, the missions open up and it tends to be a bit more exciting, but to start with, just walking around, nothing exciting.
How are you?
But so as towns are increasing in size, it's more likely that people won't recognise other people in the area. And because it's less likely that you'll recognise people, people feel a bit more inclined, if they do feel inclined to steal from anyone in the first place, to steal thinking they'll get away with it. If you think of a community of 10 people, if someone steals from someone within that group, chances are you'll see that person again. And that puts people off wanting to commit a crime. As towns increase in size, however, it's the opposite. The more people there are, the more some people are willing to take a chance and commit a crime, hoping to get away with it. So there's more theft, there's more fraud, but also there's a lot of people living in poverty. Now, one of the weird things about early modern England is a crime, something that was introduced as a crime and was kind of solidified in law, was laws against being a vagabond, which basically means being without a job or being without a home. So basically it was a crime to be homeless, and it was a crime to beg on the streets. And we'll come on to the punishment for this type of crime later. But it was a real problem in early modern England, and loads of laws were introduced to try and help people who were poor. Some were more successful than others, but the one we're interested in is the fact that it became a crime to be poor in England at this time. Now, just having a quick scan, I can see there's some comments coming through, but let's have a look. Okay, right, there's some questions here about things that have happened that I'm not going into. But nothing history related, so I'm going to park that for now, and we'll just carry on. So, there are crimes, there's an increase in crime such as petty theft, there's an increase in fraud, there's an increase in people being homeless, which becomes a crime. There's also, and it's been touched on, witchcraft becomes a crime that is seen as a capital offence. Now what that means is laws are introduced. I think the first time this happens is 1542. Maybe someone can fact check me on that one. But a law is introduced that says that performing witchcraft is punishable by death. Now, whether you believe personally in whether witchcraft is a thing or not, people had been performing certain actions before the 16th century and weren't being executed for it, but a law is introduced that makes this a capital offence, so you can be executed for performing certain actions which qualify as witchcraft. And it could be anything from, giving out certain potions. That makes it sound more, you know, cynical, I guess, than it is. But for giving certain concoctions to people, for holding or keeping hold of parts of dead animals. People thought that this was quite strange and linked to witchcraft, and there's an increase in concern about the impact of witches on people. And we're going to come on to this because one of the ways this is kind of fought against by people is by people setting up witch hunting groups or becoming witch hunters or witch finders to try and stop people from performing witchcraft. Now, whether these things were actually being performed or whether certain accusations were just levelled against people, oh goodness, on the basis of yeah, I'm hoping that this cutscene speeds up a little bit. Or whether they, they were legit accusations or not, it is something completely different, and we'll come to that. But witchcraft becomes a criminal offence, but also the big one. Right, something's happened to Ezio, who's the main character's sister here, I think. So, looks like this is going to descend quite quickly.
Maybe your sister
shouldn't be so stingy
with her virtue. You broke her heart.
1542. Someone's fact checked me. That's good. Yeah, the Duncan machine. We're going to come on to it. Okay. Now I've turned down. I don't know if what the sound is like coming through the for you lot, but I've turned it down. Now it suits me because a lot of it's just I'm getting old now, and this is getting out of hand, so I can't really listen to too much. So, so now, right, here we go. So this will be a very so. Right, he started it, so it is self-defense, which changes things quite a bit. Oh, you can taunt someone. Oh, don't do it seemingly when they're about to smack you. So, right, let's get this guy out of the way. Come on, strafe. I don't even know what a strafe is. It's not a bit of that, is it? Dodging, and this shows. I mean, my wife has had me for years saying that I can't multitask, which is just evidence because I can't talk or think about anything here apart from this. So just get out of the way, mate. I've got letters to deliver and fetch quests to complete. Right, that'll do. So, you'll probably apologise now for whatever he's done that needs to stop. Right, okay. Yeah, it is an odd game, isn't it? It's loud enough to understand what's going on. Right, I've turned it down, so whoever that is, who's been very helpful, and let me know the news from there. So, that's enough of that. Everyone is a beat-up events unlocked. Oh, we're not too focused on beat-up events, are we? Come on. But one key law that really does come to the fore in this time period, and it's huge actually to understand in the context of religious changes, the split from Rome when Henry splits the church so he can get his divorce causes a great deal of kind of disagreement and hardship on the religious front. People just don't know what they're really supposed to believe from, say, the government. So new laws regarding heresy are introduced. On the one hand, when Protestantism is introduced to ensure people are following the Protestant Church, this is reinforced by Edward VI, Henry's son. But then, when Mary I becomes the Queen, she's known as Bloody Mary because she is involved in the execution of hundreds of people because they will not recant their religious beliefs. And this is important in the context of crime and punishment because the type of punishment that's dished out, and we're going to come on to this later, is unique in this time period. If you were found guilty of heresy, and not just Mary I, but she's associated with this the most, you could be burned at the stake. So we'll come on to punishments later, but it's just worth flagging up. Heresy was a law. There were laws about heresy in medieval England, so they weren't new, but the extent to which they were kind of followed up and enforced was quite different. So that's key question 2. Key question 1, who's in charge? It's the king or the queen still. Key question 2, what types of crime are prominent? I'm trying to get to the top of this tower. Well, heresy was a big one. Witchcraft becomes a capital offence. There's an increase in petty theft. And I've already said all the rest. So we'll move on to number 3, okay? So, just check in for any questions or anything that people might be confused about or anything anybody wants clarifying. Can't see anything. So, we'll just get ourselves around here. And we'll have a look at key question 3. There is actually, someone's just clocked Spider-Man. Now, there is a Spider-Man game based in New York, which is actually a pretty detailed recreation. Oh no. Yeah, not good. Ugh. What a noob. Alright, someone's got a question. Let's have it. Let's have the question before we go to key question. Key question 3. Yeah, oops, definitely. Do you know what? That's not even me. That's poor design on the the developer's part. That's what that is. Right, I can't. I've not got the stomach to get back up there. We'll have another look later, and we'll see if we can access the viewpoint another time. Let's go and crack on with something else. I mean, what I would like, I want to get the robes. You know, the robes that they wear in Assassin's Creed, because it just feels weird running around without them, and that generally means the story's starting. So, let's see. What was heresy? Heresy were laws regarding religious belief in the country. So, if the country was a Protestant nation and a law was put in place saying you had to observe certain Protestant beliefs, such as Protestant beliefs about taking bread and wine in church, I'm going the wrong way, then you had to respect them. If you were teaching something that the government was saying, the king or the queen was saying was against the church's beliefs, then that you were committing heresy and you could be executed for that. So that's what that means. I'm glad that the explanation was detailed. That's a start. I'm a heretic, someone said. Well, we've been looking at this actually with Year 7 today about what a heretic is. It's mostly associated with religious belief, but it is not always associated with religious belief. So often people who just disagree or have a different belief can sometimes be called heretics. Question. When was it first decided that someone would reign over everyone else and have the power to control the country? That's an excellent question, yeah? It depends, obviously, on who you speak with. Now, there's a famous political theorist called Karl Marx, he's not the originator of the idea of communism, but he's one of the main. He basically set the rails along which much of communist thinking would develop around, and he put forward his theory was thousands of years ago or whatever, people were living in communities where everyone provided for everyone else. So communities of say 20 to 30 people where everyone had a job. Oh, I've got to collect feathers. Brilliant. What a fantastic mission. Where are the feathers? Oh, boring, isn't it? We use idea of, oh, I've got an idea, right, third mission in, have him running around the roof collecting feathers for a kid. Or whatever, we'll get on with it. So Karl Marx basically, he comes up with this theory that when people are in communities where everyone has a job and everyone supports each other, no one has to be in charge. You can make decisions together. So if you're going to make a decision about where to live or where to go and hunt things or whatever, everyone can engage in that on some level. But over time, as more people join the group, as people have families or people, whatever, merge with other groups, some people will realise that it makes sense to have a decision maker. It makes sense to have someone who's got authority over others. And slowly but surely this develops into a situation where one person takes control of the group, and he calls that, what does he call that? I think he establishes that as feudalism. So the idea that one person is in charge and gives privileges to others. So that's a really good question. Now obviously in different places at different times, if that is true, and there's plenty of Karl Marx's thinking that, I'll be honest, I think is very questionable, but if that general principle is true, that at some point in human history, humans started wanting a leader, then, maybe that's how it started. And it started in different places at different times. And, if you think that there are places in the Bible where it talks about the Israelites, a group of people wanting a king, wanting someone to rule over them because they thought they saw this in other places and they thought it was helpful and it would help them make quicker decisions. So there's no real set time, but that's an excellent question. And it does link with some of what we're looking at here, because whoever's in charge defines what crime is, don't they? Now, I'm not gonna, Hitler is not in this game. And I'm just going to leave whatever's going on there to go on at the moment. This is why I think I'm going to need an extra pair of hands. I'm going to need some help here with these streams, just to kind of make sure I'm not missing too much in the comments, and that someone can help me get on top of it, isn't there? Is there any combat? Well, we did just have a bit of a scrap with one lad who was, I don't even know what was going on, but I think he'd been cheating on my sister or something. So we had a bit of a scrap about that, which we won, thankfully. Would have been embarrassing if not, but then I did just fall out of a tower straight after. Right, okay, right, let's just see what else is next. Another mission around here. Fetch quest. Definitely a fetch quest. We've done some feather collecting. It'll be another fetch quest.
Buongiorno, Ezio.
So this is my mother, I think.
Come state?
Sto bene. And you? Still recovering from last
Of course,
night?
major happy birthday to William Taylor. 13 today, the big 1-3.
I have an errand.
Superb.
I'd like you to join.
What a day. I hope you have a good day,
It's not
William.
far from here.
Exciting stuff. So just like, and now, as like a birthday gift, I'm going to follow my mother to go and collect something, definitely, and then bring it somewhere else, probably. This is it, you got to follow them then. Look at this, so slow. Oh my word, this is.
Per piacere.
If you could condense Assassin's Creed missions into one mission, this is it. Yes, happy birthdays galore for William. That's my, yeah, I could ask for some help at some level. I'm going to have a look, aren't I? I do need Miss Gibbs. To be fair, I do anyway. Well, she's very, very helpful. She's very patient with me when I'm always asking loads of questions on what I'm supposed to be doing by myself, so... Right, look, and they're so slow. This is it, do you know what I mean? Like, honestly, hanging around. Wait, just go, let's go, let's go, let's go. So, right, let's crack on. So, key question 3 is, how is the law enforced? Now, when we looked at medieval England, we looked at the tithing system, which was a system in which people in the community had responsibility for ensuring other people within the community also respected the law. No, I haven't either. Yeah, I haven't either. So, yeah, I think so. Maybe a more maturity would be helpful. So under the tithing system, the groups of 10 people, 10 men who were responsible for enforcing the law, ensuring that other people within that group of 10 behaved themselves, basically. And if you were,
This is my son, Ezio.
I'm just having a look in the comments. Yeah, so it's interesting. I touched on this. There's a question
Let me go and fetch
in.
the I'll be right back.
He's very talented.
Okay, people love school. Brilliant. That's what we like. Now I'm just reading through the comments. There's a question here, which I've touched on in a previous video, just briefly, in that homosexual behaviour or homosexual activity was illegal in England for a long time, and it was only in the 1960s that homosexual activity was decriminalised. Now, this is not actually too far out from what we're thinking about here, because, as it happens, I'll carry a box, okay? We're going to be thinking now about how the law is enforced. Some laws are enforced more than others, okay? So,
You're to be a banker.
even though the law changed on that in the UK in the 1960s, and we'll come on to this in a future stream actually, not all laws are enforced always in all times, and in some periods, as we've already talked about, they're enforced more so than they are elsewhere. Hassan, of course you can. Hassan wants to shout out. I'm supposed to be taking this somewhere. Well, I guess they're following me now. So in terms of questions, right, yes, Tuesdays and Thursdays is generally when I'm streaming at the moment, purely because Year 11 have an exam coming up. Anybody who's doing the EdXL GCSE history paper and is sitting it this year have an exam coming up, so I want to make sure that we basically get through the information by the time they sit it. So at the minute, I'm streaming Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I've got streamer fatigue, guys. Like, it's a tough slog streaming, playing PlayStation and talking about it. So I'm going to need some motivation, some encouragement. What I need is more subscribers. That's what I need. So I need 100 new subscribers to carry on doing this, because people are already asking me how I'm justifying this time-wise, and people are asking me what my wife thinks about the fact I'm streaming, and I think she's on board as long as I keep getting subscribers. Turns out my wife is a big fan of me getting more subs, so we need more, we need more, we need more. So whilst I'm walking into the wall here, let me just turn around and drop this off here. So make sure that people know what we're doing here, because this is, this is for, it's supposed to be useful, and if it works, if this does work generally as a concept, but we'll move forward and keep doing it. If it doesn't, I end up just talking to myself in a room, then I've got a problem. I need to advertise more. I do need to advertise more, but advertise for me, guys. Everyone who's on here now, I trust you. In terms of, right, good, so hopefully we can move on. In terms of making sure more people know about what's happening. Yeah, and that's true, that probably is how. Posters is a good idea. We could get some posters. I'll have to design some. Yeah, I'll get on it. I'll have to get onto social media too. So all in good time, I guess. But anyway, let's move on with how the law is enforced. So you've got the tithing system in medieval England, and you had something called the hue and cry. Now the hue and cry was when basically, if a crime had been committed in public, you had to shout out and ask for help, and people would come and they would come and basically arrest you. Now, if you'd committed a crime, now not arrest in the sense that you probably understand it with handcuffs and the police, but basically if someone in the community had stolen something and said, I need help, or whatever, then what that would mean is that people in the nearby vicinity who heard the hue and cry would have to help out. Now, this kind of remains in early modern England purely because it is somewhat effective. Now, the tithing system doesn't really survive, and that dies out because as towns grow in size, well, you can't really organise yourself. People are moving in and out. It's hard to organise a system where people are moving in and out. It's hard to organise a system in which people are designated to look after the behaviour of other people. Because people are moving, people are leaving, people are going, people are coming. But the hue and cry in which you just call for help and people help you is a little bit different. So that hangs around a little bit longer. But what we do see in early modern England is there's an increased focus on certain people within the community having more of a role than they did before. Now, I talked about this in the medieval England stream, but towards the end of the later Middle Ages, people are introduced called keepers of the peace. And keepers of the peace,
He just happens to look exactly.
basically, I can just get distracted. My wife's right, I can't multitask, guys. I can't do it. So let's turn all this right down for the time being. There we go. So, justices of the peace are established in the later Middle Ages, and their job is to ensure that people within the community are generally following the law, following the tithing system, or whatever. And coroners are introduced to ensure that suspicious deaths are investigated. These systems develop even more so in right now that we've got a bit of talk out of the way. These systems develop even more so in I'm going to stop doing this because I did put a disclaimer out earlier too anyway, so they develop even more during early modern England. Now, one of the ways this happens is that justices of the peace start meeting up with other justices of the peace, and they have their own local areas that they are responsible for enforcing the law in. They're voluntary jobs, but a justice of the peace was usually a rich landowner who was there to ensure that people within their area were enforcing the law. And one of the key ways that they did this was they appointed something called town or parish constables. A town or parish constable was a part-time job, usually held by someone who might have been a merchant in the area who basically made things and sold things for money. And they would be responsible for patrolling the area, the local town maybe, and making sure that people were doing what they should be, breaking up fights. They had the power to arrest people, and they had the ability to basically arrest people and take them to court. Now, it was an unpaid job mostly. Now some, do you know what, actually, it's quite hard to determine whether they were paid or not. Some probably were, some in some local areas weren't, but regardless of whether they got paid or not, it wasn't a particularly effective system because, as you can probably imagine, if you've got a job, let's say you're a blacksmith, and your job is making horseshoes, but someone also says on the side, well, you are also responsible for making sure other people are doing what they should be and arresting those who aren't and breaking up fights. Well, if you're not earning that much money, if any, from that, your focus is going to be on making horseshoes. So it doesn't really work particularly well. And alongside town constables, you have night watchmen. Basically, a town constable at night time. They would basically start their shift, although it wasn't as organised as a shift, so probably not a good phrase, between, say, about 10, and they would be responsible for enforcing the law until dawn. So basically, what they'd be responsible for doing is, right, we've got one more errand to complete, and then hopefully we're going to get out of this boring start to this game. And the night watchman's job would be to patrol the area at night time and to make sure that people were doing exactly the same. You know, not fighting, not stealing, arresting people who are up to no good, and so on and so forth. Now, this was different to a system where you just let everybody look after themselves and enforce the law between themselves, but it still wasn't as effective as you might think the police are now, which we'll come to, because the police are going to make their appearance in the next stream that we do. So, in terms of law enforcement, you've got justices of the peace who oversee a certain area, you've got town constables who enforce the law at daytime, and you've got night watchmen who enforce the law at night time. Not so effective because, like I say, lots of these people had other things that they were concerned with, and the community still were responsible in large part for making sure that the law was upheld to some degree where they were. So that's key question 3, although we're going to touch on something called professional thief takers in a moment, but I can see some comments, so let's just see if we've got any questions. So can I ask why you made a chat? Yeah, good question actually. Just let's have a look. It's coming up a few times. So Facecam, yeah, I've been told I need to get a camera. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I get more views. Do you think I get more views with the camera? Maybe that's what I need to do then. Maybe that's the next step. Call of Duty World War 2. Yep, could do potentially. We are going to look at World War 2. I've got some ideas about how we're going to do World War 2 actually. Why did I make a channel? Well, it's interesting. In all honesty, I made the channel because I thought it was going to save me a lot of time. Now, I was actually playing Red Dead Redemption 2 when I came up with the idea, and I just thought that I was teaching at the same time that I was playing it casually. I thought, well, there's actually quite a lot of the information that came up in the game, or a lot of what I saw in the game, was coming up in what I was teaching. So I just thought it would be handy, or be quite fun, to potentially take the PlayStation into school and just show this. But then I realised that that's quite faffy, having to move the PlayStation and whatever. So I just got into the habit of thinking that maybe the best way to... I don't know what's trying to get me to do here. Okay, brilliant. Well, that was a good mission, wasn't it? Go to a bird cage and push L1. Well, at least we're done. So I just started thinking, well, it would be a better time saver. I wouldn't have to move the PlayStation if I could just get stuff up on YouTube. And then I realised over time that if I made videos alongside PlayStation gameplay clips or whatever, it would probably be more engaging than just using a textbook. So basically, I'm hoping to create virtual textbooks of a kind where the information that's needed in class can be shown on the screen. Now, it doesn't work so much with this one, but the information is still, you know, fairly useful. I just think it's more interesting than how we do a lot of school. Maybe not, maybe people prefer textbooks and how we've done them historically, but I just thought it might be a bit different. And also it's a bit of fun, because in the grand scheme of things, I'm literally playing PlayStation, so suits me. And yeah, I can see there's another teacher I know with who's got a YouTube channel. Yeah, maybe we should do a collab. That could be fun, couldn't it? Although my my maths is very, very poor, so not a bad shout. Let's see. Okay. Well, I'm glad someone's finding amazing facts. I'm sure that's completely sincere and not sarcastic at all. But yeah, no, that's the purpose really of doing it this way. And I think in terms of these particular streams, what's useful about them, in all honesty, is it's really useful whilst people are on to ask questions. But now, once this has been recorded, people who are in my GCSE class, or people who are about to sit an exam, not even from my class, but from other classes, anywhere, can still access the information, and they can use it to revise, they can use it to help them with exams, because a lot of what we're talking about here, the key questions we're considering, are questions and are topics that will come up in a GCSE paper. So hopefully you'll be interested on that front too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure too, thank you.
Father?
Those 4 questions are literally ingrained in my mind. Excellent. Yeah, if you have if you have a question, or if you have those 4 questions in mind, I'm going to show this towards the end hopefully, but once you know the answer for each particular unit, there is an exam. There's one of the questions specifically asks you to make comparisons or draw, to compare and contrast different things across the entire unit. So yeah, that would be really useful.
She's in shock. When she resisted.
So let me just
safe
okay,
here.
something annoying.
Is there some place you can take
I'm going to ignore some of this because
yes, to my
it's not
sisters.
particularly useful.
Good. Do that. In the meantime,
There
I'll
was
go
a
see my
question in
father.
there about, do you
Be
have a
careful,
paper where you put
Messerezio.
notes for stream?
The
No,
guards
now
are looking
I
for you
could,
as well.
in theory, but I have been putting into the description a video that, in theory, not a video, sorry, a worksheet that runs alongside the video that people can take notes in. So for people who are using this for revision purposes, it should be useful. But right, now this is useful. So it turns out my my dad and my family have been arrested. Now this is particularly useful for us because we're going to start thinking about the final question, the key question for today, and that is, how are people who break the law punished? Now, in early modern England, and it seems in early modern Italy, prisons were slowly developing. Now, there is no real prison in medieval England. Prison we think about often with punishment in modern day England because it's probably it's the most serious punishment you can receive now. But in medieval England, they basically didn't exist. If you were being held in a jail, you were basically being held in a cell or a room purely until your punishment started. So it wasn't really a punishment in and of itself. It was basically you were in a waiting room until you went out to be punished in some way, whether you were going to be executed, whether you were going to be whipped, whatever. Now, prisons start to develop in early modern England, but not really to any large extent. In large part, a lot of the punishments that had existed in medieval England kind of cross over. Now, a big difference we've touched on is burning at the stake for the crime of heresy. That is a big deal. And the whole point, or one of the reasons it's so brutal and it's done publicly, is to scare other people from wanting to have the same thing to happen to them. So if you don't take back your religious beliefs, or you don't do what you're told, you're going to experience something extremely painful in front of a lot of people. It's what we call a deterrent, something that puts other people off wanting to commit a certain action for fear of what will happen if they do. Now, in terms of other punishments, there are others. I'm just having a quick look. Was there ever a time? Now, this is a really good question that someone's just put in about the power between church, government, and king, queen. Now, there are moments when it's really unclear. The story of Thomas Becket is a good flashpoint of this. Thomas Becket was the Archbishop of Canterbury in medieval England, and he is he is murdered by a group of knights, seemingly upon the orders of the king, although it's not clear that the king ordered it. So it suggests that people had misunderstood the king, but thought they could go and kill a member of the church. But then the king really regrets it, to the point that he allows people from the church to whip him, to show that he's really sorry. So who is most powerful in that particular moment? Is it the king who gave the order for which a prominent member of the church would be executed, or is it the church itself who the king was so worried he'd upset, then allowed members of the church to whip him? So that's an interesting flashpoint, I guess. What's punishment if you kill a king or queen today? Well, you'd be done for murder. I think treason is still a thing, but you'd be definitely charged with murder at the very least. Now, in terms of punishment, this is really useful. You can see here the gallows. This is where people would be hanged, or hung, or hanged, I think. Now, it's out in public. It can be seen. If someone was being executed up here, it would be seen by everybody. Again, it's all about scaring people into not wanting to be up here. So if you were caught, it's all about trying to make sure if you catch someone, you punish them enough so that others won't want to do the same. And I touched on this again in medieval England. When you don't have an official policing system where you're going to catch a lot of criminals, if you catch one, you really need to give them a really harsh punishment, because you may not catch all of them. But if people know what happens with those who are caught, then it's more likely that this will impact people's behaviour. Okay? Right, let's see, any questions? Death penalty in England? No, there's no death penalty in England anymore. Even, I think, in cases of treason, that's been removed, I think, in the 90s. Yeah, the death penalty is still active in the US. We're going to come on to this, because the death penalty is super interesting, but even though the death penalty is active, say, in the United States, or at least in certain states, it's not actually used as often as people might tend to think, which kind of potentially undermines whether it might be useful or not. We'll come on to that. But in terms of punishment, for things like theft or being a beggar on the streets, you would be whipped, you would be put in the stocks or the pillory in public, you might be forced to pay a fine. That was a punishment that lots of people experienced for this sort of thing. Yeah, have a check. Someone said, I'm sure I might have said before the death penalty was still in place for treason. I think I searched this up more recently, and it's not in England now. So if someone could fact check this, that would be excellent, because that's what we want. I'm not too sure myself on that. But in terms of punishments, we've got fines, we've got the stocks and the pillory, you've got people being whipped, you've got people being hanged, as mentioned. Witches were, if they were found guilty, if someone was found guilty of being a witch, then they would be hanged. And that reminds me, actually, I forgot to mention, in terms of law enforcement, there was a system or a little scheme running where people found work as thief takers. So people would get paid to go and find people who'd been accused of stealing and bringing them to justice, and then they would be paid for it. There was a guy called Jonathan Wild, whoever, had a gang, and basically the gang were conning people, and they were given the impression that they were catching thieves, and actually the people they were catching were people from their own gang, or people that they'd set up, essentially. They were stealing things and then making out like they'd gone and recovered the things that had been stolen when they'd taken it in the first place. So I'd forgotten to mention that. Because it comes to mind when we think about witches. There were people like Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, who would go and, I would do the finger quote thing if I could, find witches and then have them executed. And there's a big moment in the mid 17th century where loads of women were executed for witchcraft on very, very flimsy grounds. But that was a key punishment for that type of crime. And I'm trying to think. I think that's it. Prison started to develop. Oh no, there's another big one. Something called transportation. Now, transportation was when people were forced to go and live in, at this stage, in early modern England, in North America. So the punishment was you would be removed from your home, put on a ship, sent to work building roads or building buildings for the British Empire in America, and you wouldn't be allowed to come back, or at least you'd be allowed to come back, but it would be very expensive, and your ticket wouldn't take you back home. So you'd be put on a ship, sent thousands of miles away, with basically the expectation that you're never going to go back home. Now, this is a big shift in punishment, and it comes back up in the next unit that we look at, because it's the time when people start to realise or start to think that actually maybe you should give people another chance if they've made a mistake. Maybe you shouldn't whip them or chop their hands off or execute them. Maybe some people should be given the chance to think about what they've done and change their behaviour. Now, let's see. Great, we've got some fact-checking. Maximum sentence for treason is life imprisonment. There we go. So it is no longer punishable by death. How did medicines work in medieval times? Huge question. There's a lot to be said there. There's an entire GCSE unit actually on the development of medicine, so we can't go there today. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have a look at how I can have a bit more control over the comments, to be honest, because some of it's getting a bit. It's not at hand, but it's slowly developing there. Now, we're going to finish up in a moment. I'm just trying to think that the plan going forward is on Thursday I'm going to cover Unit 3 of Crime and Punishment's GCSE option. We're going to look at Britain in the 18th and 19th century. We're going to play Assassin's Creed again just because there's a game set in that period, but we're going to bin off Assassin's Creed after that, and we're going to play something else next week. But there's going to be 2 for the price of 1 on Thursdays. Two for the price of 1. So we're going to have a look at Unit 3, where we look at 18th and 19th century, and we're going to answer the 4 key questions again. But then we're going to have a look at Whitechapel. We're going to look at the development of the police in London, and we're going to look at their attempts to catch Jack the Ripper. That's our plan. So that's the plan going forward. Oh, right into the wall. We're going to have a look at London at the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. The way it's represented in the game, as you can imagine, is not particularly accurate. It's not very helpful, actually. But at least in terms of the story it tells of the women who are killed, that's my big pet peeve with it. The story it tells of the women who are killed is not. It makes sense that it's not accurate, but to the extent that it is not particularly. Is not great. But the world itself, in terms of seeing where the police were based, seeing the police officers themselves, seeing the sites where some of these crimes took place and how close some of them were to one another, that's useful. So that'll be on Thursday. So on Thursday at 8 o'clock, there'll be 2 different streams. They'll run back to back, but just so that those who are revising can use this and organise themselves appropriately. That's the plan. Now let's see. Hitler and Nazi Germany. Yeah, we'll get there eventually. There's some things that we'll try, and I'm going to try and build actually to teach that. So I'm going to chop this off now. Now, if you've got any other questions or there's any games you can suggest or recommend, don't forget, please drop them in the comments. Even when this stream shuts off and these comments disappear, if you put them in the comment of the video itself, that's really useful, and I can have a look and then maybe use some suggestions from you guys for future videos. But that is it for today. We've been through the 4 key questions for early modern England. We'll have a look at 18th and 19th century Britain on Thursday. We'll have a look at Whitechapel and the Jack the Ripper murders and the police investigation into that, alongside crime and punishment in the area of Whitechapel generally. And then next week we're going to finish this revision series by looking at modern day England. We're going to look at what crime and punishment looks like today, which is going to be a lot more recognisable. So in the meantime, don't forget if you haven't already to subscribe, because then you'll see things when they come up. But also, if you haven't already, to hit the notification bell. Now, as funny as it feels to be saying that, it's actually really useful, because if you don't, then you'll miss something when it comes up, and these streams are supposed to be more useful when they're live. That's the whole point, okay, so that people can ask questions, people know what's going on. So yeah, that's it. I think that's it. And yeah, I need to chop this off now so I can catch up with some of the stuff. So thank you for those of you who've joined in, those of you who've commented, especially those who fact checked and asked good questions. Really, really useful. I'm just having a quick look. Are there any topics specifically you would advise Year 10 to revise? Yeah, this series is for Year 10 and 11. So even though for Year 11, they are on the cusp of doing the exam, you've already done the content in Year 10. You've already learnt all this stuff. So this is still useful. So the worksheet I've put in, everything that we're discussing now, it's still useful for Year 10 to go through. Now, I will be making some videos specifically for what I'm going to teach in Year 10 going forward. But for Year 10 and 11, we could do the topics in any order. So it just so happens that Year 10 have already done this, so that's fine. So it's useful for Year 10 too. But and as with anything, any subject, the earlier you get yourself thinking about the key ideas, the earlier that you kind of get some of the information embedded in your thinking, the easier revision is in the long run. It's just, there's plenty of evidence behind it, excuse me, but it's just worth thinking about. Okay? Right, now we're going to chop this off. Have a good evening all. Thank you very much for joining in so far. Yeah, right, in a bit.